The first thing Daniel noticed was the silence. Not the absence of sound, no, that would have been a relief. Silence, in its pure form, at least carried honesty. This was something else. The town still made noise, but it felt muffled, as if every sound had been wrapped in damp cloth. Even his own footsteps seemed reluctant to exist, dissolving before they fully formed. It began the morning the rain came. Daniel had woken to the soft tapping on his window, steady, patient, almost deliberate. Rain in Al Hadra was rare enough to be memorable. The town sat between dry hills and a half-forgotten road, the kind of place where weather felt like an afterthought. So when rain came, people noticed. But this time, something felt off before he even opened his eyes. The air was thick. Not humid, no, not like real rain. It felt occupied, as if something invisible pressed down from above, filling the room with a presence he couldn't name. He lay still for a moment, listening. Tap, tap, tap. Each drop struck the glass with unnatural consistency, too evenly spaced, too precise. It didn't sound like falling water. It sounded like... He forced himself to sit up. The room was dim, washed in a dull gray light that seemed to seep through the walls rather than enter through the window. The curtains stirred slightly, though there was no wind. Daniel swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. Tap, tap, tap. The sound continued. He walked to the window, his bare feet brushing against the cold tile. A faint smell reached him, metallic, sharp, like rust and wet stone. His hand hovered over the curtain. For a moment, just a moment, he hesitated. Then he pulled it aside. Rain filled the sky. Not clouds, just rain. It hung above the town like a curtain suspended mid-fall, stretching from horizon to horizon. Countless droplets shimmered in the dim light, perfectly spaced, trembling slightly but never descending. Daniel blinked. The ground below was dry. The streets were untouched. Dust lay undisturbed. The roofs bore no sign of water. And yet, above everything, the rain hovered alive, waiting. He stared, his mind struggling to reconcile what he saw. The droplets, they were stopping. Each one suspended a few meters above the ground, forming an invisible ceiling of rain that never reached its destination. And yet tap, tap, tap. He looked back at the window. Water struck the glass from outside, as though gravity still applied, but only there. Only on the surfaces of things. Only when something interrupted it. The realization made his stomach twist. The rain wasn't falling. It was waiting. By noon, the town had begun to react. Daniel stepped outside reluctantly, his unease growing with each passing minute. The air felt colder than it should have, and the smell, metallic, damp, had thickened. People gathered in the streets, staring upward. Old men muttered prayers under their breath. Children reached their hands up, laughing nervously as droplets hit their palms and then strangely slid sideways, as if pulled by an unseen force, before vanishing into the suspended curtain above. "It's not right," Mrs. Hallam said, clutching her shawl tightly.
Rainfall.
Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't stop watching the droplets. They shimmered unnaturally, catching light that didn't seem to exist. And every so often, very rarely, one would move. Not down, but sideways. Or upward. Or as if space itself had become uncertain.
Daniel.
He turned. It was Kareem, his neighbor. "You see it too, right?" Kareem asked, though the question felt unnecessary. Daniel nodded slowly.
What do you think it is?
Daniel hesitated. He searched for a rational explanation, something scientific, something safe. Temperature inversion, atmospheric anomaly, optical illusion. But none of it fit. "It's wrong," he said finally. Kareem let out a short, humorless laugh.
That's not exactly comforting.
They stood in silence for a moment, watching the unmoving rain. Then Kareem said quietly, "It started last night." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" "I woke up around 3, Kareem said. There was noise, like whispering. I thought it was the wind." Daniel's skin prickled. "But there was no wind," Kareem continued. "And when I looked outside..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "It was already like this." Daniel swallowed. "You didn't tell anyone?" Kareem looked at him, eyes dark. "Would you have believed me?" Daniel didn't answer. By evening, the unease had deepened into something heavier, something that pressed against the edges of thought. The rain remained, unchanged, unmoving. But the town felt different. Shadows stretched longer than they should. Sounds seemed to lag behind their sources. Even the light had grown strange, faintly flickering, as though the sky itself struggled to maintain consistency. Daniel returned home just before sunset. He locked the door behind him, a reflex he didn't question. Inside, the air felt thicker than before. He tried to distract himself. He made tea, though it tasted faintly metallic. He turned on the radio, but the signal wavered, voices slipping in and out like something drowning.
Not natural.
The words dissolved into static. Daniel turned it off. Tap, tap, tap. The rain against the window had grown louder. He looked up slowly. The droplets struck the glass with more force now. Not falling, never falling, but pressing, as if they were trying to get in. He stood, moving toward the window again. This time, he didn't pull the curtain aside immediately. Instead, he listened. Tap, tap, tap. Then something new. A faint sound beneath the tapping. So soft he almost missed it.
Daniel!
His breath caught. He froze. The voice had come from outside. From the rain.
Daniel.
It was unmistakable now. A voice thin, distant, and wrong. It didn't sound like it traveled through air. It felt like it arrived directly in his ears, bypassing everything in between.
He stepped back from the window.
No, he whispered. The tapping intensified. Tap, 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 tap. The glass trembled slightly under the pressure. Come closer. Daniel shook his head, backing away further. His heart pounded violently. This isn't real, he muttered. This isn't. A sharp crack interrupted him. He looked up. A single droplet had pushed halfway through the glass. Not broken, it phased through it. The surface of the window warped around it, as though reality itself had softened. The droplet hung there, trembling. And inside it, something moved. Daniel leaned back instinctively, his breath coming in short, shallow bursts. The droplet expanded slightly, stretching unnaturally. And for a brief, horrifying moment, he saw an eye, looking at him, blinking. Then the droplet snapped back into place. The glass was whole again. The tapping resumed its steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Daniel stumbled backward, nearly knocking over the table behind him. No, he said again, louder this time.
No.
But the voice returned, closer now. The lights flickered. The room darkened. And the rain pressed harder. That night, no one slept. And in every house, behind every window, the rain kept tapping.
Waiting, watching.
Listening. No one in Al-Hadra spoke about leaving. That was the strangest part. By morning, the entire town understood without needing to say it that something had broken. The laws that once held the world steady had loosened, like screws turning silently in the dark. And yet no one packed their bags. No one even suggested it. The roads remained empty. Daniel noticed this as he stood by his window, watching the suspended rain tremble in the gray morning light. It hadn't moved overnight. Not a single droplet had fallen. But something about it had changed. It felt closer. Not physically, no. The distance between the hovering curtain and the ground remained the same. But the space between them felt thinner, as though the air itself had been stretched too far and might tear if disturbed. Tap, tap, tap. The sound hadn't stopped, not once. Daniel hadn't slept. He had tried closing his eyes, turning away from the window, but every time he drifted, the whisper returned.
We see you.
And each time it sounded less like a voice and more like many voices speaking through one mouth. He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion weighing heavily on his limbs. I'm going outside, he said aloud, though no one was there to hear him. The words felt fragile in the air. The street was quieter than the day before. Not empty, but subdued. People moved slowly, cautiously, as if afraid of disturbing something unseen. Conversations were hushed. No one laughed. Even the children had stopped reaching for the droplets. Daniel stepped onto the pavement and looked up. The rain shimmered faintly. For a moment, just a moment, it looked like the droplets were turning. Not rotating physically, but reorienting like countless tiny eyes adjusting their focus. He quickly looked away. Don't stare too long. The voice came from his left. Daniel turned to see Mrs. Halim standing by her gate. Her face looked older than it had yesterday. Not in years, but in weight. Her eyes were sunken, her lips pale.
What? Daniel asked.
She gestured upward but didn't look herself. The longer you look, the more it notices you. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine.
Notices?
She nodded faintly. My grandson stared at it all night. A pause. He won't speak anymore. Daniel swallowed.
Where is he?
She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped aside slightly, revealing the dark interior of her house.
He's inside, she said quietly.
But don't go in. Daniel frowned.
Why?
Mrs. Hallam's gaze flickered upward just for a second and then back to him. Because he's not alone. Daniel went in anyway. He told himself it was concern, curiosity, rationality. But deep down, something else pulled him forward, something sharp and insistent, like a hook lodged behind his ribs. The house smelled damp. Not like water, but like something that had been wet for too long. The air was thick, carrying a faint, sour odor beneath the metallic tang.
Hello?
Daniel called softly. No response. The door creaked shut behind him. He stepped further inside. The light was dim, filtered through curtains that seemed darker than they should have been. Shadows clung to the corners of the room, unmoving. Then he heard it, a faint, rhythmic sound. Dripping, but not from above, from somewhere deeper in the house. Daniel followed it. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the floor resisted his movement. The air grew colder, denser. The sound led him to a small bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open and froze. The boy sat on the bed facing the wall, completely still. His back was rigid, his hands resting limply at his sides. His head tilted slightly upward as though he were looking at something above him. But there was nothing there. The wall was bare.
Hey, Daniel said gently.
Are you okay? No response. Daniel stepped closer. The dripping sound grew louder. Drip. He looked around, trying to locate the source. There was no water on the floor. No leaks in the ceiling. Then he saw it. A single droplet hovered in the air above the boy's head. Just one. Suspended. Perfectly still. Daniel's breath caught. How did that? The boy's lips moved. Slowly.
Don't. Daniel leaned in. What?
Daniel stared at the droplet. It trembled slightly. ... It wants to fall, the boy whispered. A cold dread settled in Daniel's chest.
What happens if it does? He asked.
The boy didn't answer immediately. Instead, his head tilted further upward. Too far. His neck stretched at an unnatural angle. Then it gets in, he said. The droplet shuddered, and then it dropped. Daniel didn't see it hit. One moment it hovered, the next it vanished. But the sound, a soft, wet impact. Not on the floor, not on the bed, but somewhere inside. The boy's body jerked violently. His mouth opened in a silent scream, and then he turned, slowly, too slowly. His face was pale, his eyes wide, and wrong. There was something moving behind them, something fluid, something watching. It's cold, the boy whispered. Daniel stumbled backward. What is happening to you? The boy smiled. Not with his mouth, with something deeper. It's raining inside now. A faint sound echoed through the room. Tap, tap, tap. Daniel's eyes widened. The sound wasn't coming from the window. It was coming from the walls, from the ceiling, from everywhere. Tiny droplets began to form in the air around them, barely visible, like distortions in space. No, Daniel was... The boy stood. His movements were stiff, puppet-like. ... It once more, he said. Daniel turned and ran. He burst out of the house, gasping for air. Mrs. Halim stood where he had left her. She didn't ask what he saw. She already knew.
It fell, didn't it? She said quietly.
Daniel nodded, unable to speak. She closed her eyes briefly. It always starts with one. Daniel shook his head. We need to leave. We need to get out of here. Mrs. Halim looked at him with something like pity. No one leaves. Why not? She glanced toward the road. Daniel followed her gaze. At the edge of town, where the road disappeared into the hills, the rain hung lower, closer. And beyond it, there was nothing. No sky, no distance. Just a gray, shifting void. Daniel's stomach dropped. "What is that?" Mrs. Hellam's voice was barely a whisper. "That's where it's already fallen." That evening, the rain pressed closer. Not visibly, but undeniably. The air inside Daniel's house grew heavier. The tapping grew louder. And as he sat alone in the dim light, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The droplets outside, they weren't trying to get in anymore.
They were waiting for something inside to let them.
That night, the town began to breathe. Daniel noticed it first in the walls. A slow expansion, then contraction, like lungs. He sat rigid in his chair, staring at the ceiling as the faint rhythm pulsed through the house. It was subtle, so subtle that he almost convinced himself it wasn't real, until the tapping changed. Tap, tap, tap. Yali! Tap, tap.
Exhale.
"It's inside," he whispered. The realization came not as a thought, but as a certainty, cold and absolute. It had crossed the boundary. Not through the doors, not through the windows, through something else, something thinner. The power went out just after midnight. The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging the house into a darkness so complete it felt physical. Daniel didn't move. He listened. The tapping stopped, and for a moment there was true silence. It lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then drip, inside the house. Daniel's breath hitched. Another drip, closer. He turned his head slowly toward the sound. The darkness seemed to shift in response. Not move, no. Rearrange. His eyes strained, adjusting. And then he saw it. A droplet. Hanging in the air just a few feet away. Perfectly still. Daniel froze. "No," he whispered. The droplet trembled. Behind it, something flickered, like a shadow trying to take shape inside water. Daniel stumbled backward. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, and the droplet reacted. It moved, not falling but gliding toward him.
Daniel ran.
Instinct took over, raw and unthinking. He rushed through the hallway, his shoulders slamming into the wall as he turned. The house felt wrong now, distorted, stretched. The hallway seemed longer than it should have been, the shadows deeper. Behind him, drip. Not one anymore. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Because something told him if he saw them fully, he wouldn't be able to look away. He burst out the front door. The town was awake. Screams filled the air. Doors hung open. Lights flickered in the distance. People stumbled into the streets, some crying, some silent, all of them looking upward or inward. The rain above had changed. It had lowered. Not much, but enough. The suspended curtain now hovered just above the rooftops, pressing down like a ceiling about to collapse. And within it, movement. Not random, not chaotic, coordinated. Daniel's heart pounded. "They're aligning," he whispered. The droplets shifted slowly, forming patterns. And then faces. Hundreds. Thousands. Faint, distorted impressions pressed into the curtain of rain, as though something behind it strained to look through. To find openings. To find entrances. A man stumbled past Daniel, clutching his head. "They're inside me," he muttered. "I can feel them moving like veins like." His words broke into a scream. He collapsed onto the ground. Daniel stepped back in horror as the man's body began to twitch violently, and then drip. A droplet fell from the man's mouth. Daniel stared. It hit the ground and didn't splash. It stood, rising slightly, trembling, watching. "Oh, God," Daniel whispered. "They're making us into doors." A sudden crack split the air. Daniel looked up. The rain shuddered. For the first time, it moved downward, not falling, but pressing, lower, closer. The space between it and the town narrowed visibly, like a tightening noose. Panic surged through the crowd. "They're coming down!" someone shouted. No, they said it wouldn't fall." "It's not falling," Daniel said hoarsely. No one heard him.
It's choosing.
The first contact came at the edge of the square. A woman stood frozen, staring upward. Too long. Daniel recognized the look, the same one Mrs. Halim had warned him about. The noticing, the recognition, the invitation. A single droplet separated from the curtain. It descended slowly, deliberately. Everyone watched. No one moved. The droplet hovered just above the woman's forehead. For a moment, nothing. Then it passed through her skin. No resistance, no wound. Just... The woman gasped. Her body went rigid. And then she smiled.
The same wrong smile.
The same deep, impossible expression.
We're here now, she said.
But it wasn't her voice. It was layered, many speaking through one. The town broke. People ran. Some tried to hide. Others fell to their knees, praying. A few stood still, too still, staring upward as more droplets descended. Daniel backed away, his mind racing. This isn't random. It's systematic. They weren't attacking. They were entering.
Matt, occupy.
Learning. And the worst part, they were doing it slowly, on purpose. Daniel! He turned. Kareem rushed toward him, breathless.
We have to go.
Kareem said.
Now.
Daniel shook his head. You saw the road. There has to be another way. There isn't, Daniel snapped. Kareem grabbed his arm. Then we make one. Another crack echoed overhead. More droplets began to descend. Not many. Just enough.
Selected.
Precise. Daniel felt something brush his cheek. Cold. He froze. Slowly, very slowly, he lifted his hand.
Touched his face.
His fingers came away wet.
His breath stopped.
A droplet hovered just inches from his eye. He hadn't seen it approach. It pulsed faintly. Inside it, movement.
Familiar.
Observant.
We found you.
Daniel staggered backward, panic flooding his body. No stay away. The droplet moved closer.
Not fast.
Not aggressive.
Sift down.
Kareem shouted something, but Daniel couldn't hear it. The world narrowed. Just him. And the droplet. You've been looking at us for so long, it said. Now we look back. The droplet touched his skin, and everything stopped. No sound. No movement. No breath. For a single suspended moment, Daniel saw everything. Not with his eyes. With something deeper. An endless expanse of suspended rain. Not just above the town, everywhere. An entire layer of reality pressing against theirs. Waiting.
Watch.
And behind it, something vast. Something patient. Something that had always been there, just out of reach. Until now.
Daniel screamed.
The connection broke. He collapsed to the ground, gasping. The droplet was gone. But the cold remained. Inside him. Around him, the town continued to unravel. More people fell. More droplets descended. More voices joined the growing chorus. Daniel pushed himself up, trembling. They're not just coming here, he whispered. They've always been here. Kareem stared at him.
What are you talking about?
Daniel looked up at the lowering rain. His voice was hollow. We're the ones who were above them. By dawn, there were fewer screams. Not because things had improved, because there were fewer people left to scream. The town of Al-Hadra stood in a strange, trembling stillness. Doors hung open. Windows shattered not from force, but from pressure, as though something inside had leaned too hard against reality itself. The streets were scattered with people, some unmoving.
Some standing, watching.
Waiting. Daniel moved through them like a ghost. The cold inside him had settled. It wasn't pain. It wasn't even fear anymore. It was presence. Something quiet. Something aware. He could feel it not as a separate being, but as a second layer of thought beneath his own. It didn't speak. Not directly. But it observed. And worse, it understood. The rain had lowered again. Now it hovered just above head height. Close enough that the droplets cast faint, shifting reflections across the ground like ripples of light that didn't belong to any sun. Faces moved within it, clearer now, distinct. Daniel recognized some of them. Neighbors, strangers, people who had already been, but they weren't trapped. They were looking out, watching the town the way the town had once watched the sky. Kareem walked beside him in silence. He hadn't spoken since the night before. Not after the moment one of the droplets brushed his shoulder and he had simply stopped reacting. Now he walked normally, too normally, His posture was perfect, his breathing steady.
His eyes too focused.
"Do you feel it?" Daniel asked quietly. Kareem turned his head slowly. "Yes," he said. His voice was calm, layered. "We're clearer now." Daniel's stomach tightened.
We?
Kareem smiled faintly, but it wasn't his smile. They reached the edge of town, or what used to be the edge. The road was gone, not broken, not destroyed. Just in its place stretched a gray expanse, flat, depthless, and shifting slightly like something unfinished. And above it the rain had already descended, fully, touching the surface of that void, becoming part of it. Daniel stared. "That's where it spreads," he said. Kareem nodded. No hesitation, no fear, just certainty. Daniel turned to him. "You knew this would happen." Kareem's gaze didn't waver. "We didn't know," he said. "We remembered." The cold inside Daniel stirred. For the first time it pushed forward, not forcefully, but insistently, like a thought trying to surface. "Look closer." Daniel's vision shifted. The world blurred not outward but inward. Layers peeled back, and suddenly he saw it, not with his eyes, but with that deeper awareness. The rain was not falling. It had never been falling. It was rising, not from the sky, from beneath, from another place entirely. Each droplet was a point of contact, a thin place where two realities touched. For years, centuries, maybe longer, they had remained separated. A balance, a boundary. But something had changed. The pressure had built, and now the other side was pushing through. Daniel staggered back, his breath catching. "We're not being invaded," he whispered. Kareem tilted his head. "No." Daniel's voice trembled. "We're being..." Kareem's smile deepened.
Not replaced, he said.
Continued. A low hum filled the air. The rain trembled. Then it began to descend fully, not in droplets, in sheets. The suspended curtain collapsed not violently, but smoothly, like a veil being lowered over the world. Daniel looked up. For the first time, the rain touched the ground, but it didn't splash. It didn't soak. It merged. The surface of the street shimmered, then softened like liquid, pretending to be solid. Buildings blurred at the edges. The sky above flickered, losing definition. Reality itself was dissolving into something else. Something deeper. Something that had always been waiting just beneath it. People stood still as the rain passed through them. Some smiled.
Some simply...
Their outlines softened. Their movements slowed, and then they aligned, perfectly, like reflections settling into place. Daniel felt it reach him. The rain. It didn't hit his skin. It passed through it, cold, endless. And suddenly he wasn't just himself anymore. He stood in two places at once, in the town and somewhere else. A vast, endless expanse of suspended droplets stretching in every direction. A world made entirely of waiting, of watching, of quiet, patient observation, and within it countless others. Not individuals, not exact, more like all connected, all aware, all looking. You see now, the voice wasn't separate. It was him, and not him. A convergence. Daniel's thoughts flickered.
Wow.
The answer came not as words, but as understanding.
We are what remains when nothing falls.
The town disappeared. Not destroyed, not erased, just absorbed. Its shape dissolved into the greater whole, like a drop returning to an ocean. And then there was quiet. Sometime later, or perhaps immediately, Daniel stood again. But not in Al-Hadra. Not anywhere recognizable. The world had changed. Or maybe it had always been this way. He stood beneath a sky filled with suspended rain, perfectly still, untouched,
Waiting.
and far below on a distant, solid ground he saw something. A different place. Another town. Another world. Looking up, Daniel felt a flicker of something old. Something human. A warning. A memory. A fear. "Don't look too long," he whispered. But his voice didn't carry. Not across the boundary. Above that distant world, the rain began to gather, and for the first time it started to fall.